What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another roster bubble series video. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Turn on post notifications so you know when the live stream pops through your drops. Appreciate y'all coming back. Also, share this out during the NFL offseason between training camp and mini camps and all that stuff. It's pretty much a dead time. So a lot of content creators who do a lot of football content don't get a lot of views, like myself. As much as the regular season. So sharing it out to different communities, other fans, other NFL fans, or the Giant fans really helps the cause, and we'll get to milestones faster because of you guys, and I appreciate your ongoing support. Also give a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts for Big Blue in the Bronx and Twin Bill. With that being said, I hope you guys are having a phenomenal 4th of July day weekend. I'll be in Staten Island on Monday, so there will be no Boys in the Big Apple podcast. Donald will be in Pittsburgh, so there's that. And we'll be returning July 11th with our usual stuff, Knicks, Giants, whatever, is on the table at the time. Undrafted free agent video in terms of a preview of the undrafted free agents that could make an impact on this team and could make the 53-man roster. That's going to come out in a few days. I don't know when, but expect it between Sunday and Tuesday. I had a very fun time, and I'm not going to mention the content creator's name because I'll leave it for the video, but I had a very fun time talking about the undrafted free agents with one of the content creators that I was with in that video. He's more of the article writing, film breakdown, and also podcasting, not really in the YouTube spectrum, but he does a great job, and once you guys find out who it is, you'll know, and you'll be familiar with his work. But back to the roster bubble series video. If you guys haven't been here before, what I do in these videos is I take a player that's on the roster bubble. Then I go ahead and talk about their background, their competition, how they could win a spot on the roster, how they could lose a spot on the roster, and also, followed up by prediction. So with that being said, let's get right into things. I'm going to pull up today's candidate profile, whatever you want to call it. David Sills. The Sills Army will come after me if I don't have a right prediction. But in all seriousness, David Sills has been with the Giants for many years now. He was an undrafted free agent out of West Virginia in 2019, and he actually signed with Buffalo. So there is some familiarity with Joe Schoen and Brian Dable. After the preseason was finished, he got cut. Then the Giants signed him to the practice squad. 2020, he was looking really good. What was I going to say? In the preseason, well, it wasn't really preseason. It was training camp because of the COVID season. They had no preseason games, but in training camp, he was looking really good. And, the beat was making him up to be possibly one of the 4, 5, 6 receiver spots on the roster. So he did not make the roster because of a foot injury he sustained during camp. Then he was put on IR, and he was signed to a futures contract at the end of the year. Then, with that being said, he stayed over for another year, and he still made some noise in the 2021 training camp period. And he had a couple of mistakes during preseason games, but he also had a touchdown catch against the Browns. He had about 84 receiving yards or 64 receiving yards. I want to say it was 64 receiving yards on 3 receptions against the Jets from Clayton Thorson. I think he was the quarterback that game. But anyway, so with that being said, he gets cut, and then he gets signed to the practice squad. Nobody else picks him up. He got signed to the active roster because of some COVID stuff and some injuries. So he actually played against the Panthers. And with that being said, he actually dropped a pass on a slant. Not very good. And then he was reverted back to the practice squad. Then he was promoted to the active roster later on for one game, and that was pretty much it. And then he re-signed with the Giants. So David Sills, everybody. But with that being said, let's go into his competition. Actually, let's review his stats real quick. In 2 games, at least I believe it is 2 games. Now, it's weird because Pro Football Reference does actually not have, they don't have a stats page on him, at least that I was looking up. Okay, so they do have a stats page, never mind. But in 4 games, he had 2 receptions, 17 yards, 1 first down, and those 2 receptions actually came against the Eagles when it was an entire blowout in the second half of the season. He was actually one of the leading receivers, which was very sad. Evan Ingram also had 2 catches for 17 yards as well. I believe that was the Eagle game, but he also started the game that year. And in terms of offensive snaps, if you want to go into that real quickly, he played a total of 37% of the offensive snaps and 22% on special teams. So his competition looks like this: Keelan Doss, former Raiders wide receiver; CJ Board, who's been here a couple of years, special teamer, former Jaguar. He's been somewhat impactful in this offense as a 5'6" guy and also on special teams in the return game. Alex Bachman, he's had like 2 games played over the last few years, mostly on special teams, but sometimes in the receiving game. Robert Foster, who was a draft pick of the Buffalo Bills, didn't work out there, went to Washington for a little bit, and he's now with the Giants, back with familiarity from Buffalo. Richie James Jr., San Francisco 49ers wide receiver. Colin Johnson, obviously had him last year, made a couple of contested catches, made a couple of catches just overall. Was a former Jaguar out of Texas. Travis Toivonen, I don't know much about him, but I think he's an undrafted free agent from last year. Then Austin Prohl, who's pretty much a journeyman wide receiver, has been really the definition of a camp body over the last couple of years. So, with that being said, how can he win one of the spots on the roster? And I say this every episode with wide receivers, so get used to hearing it because we have a ton of wide receivers to go through for roster mobile videos leading in to training camp. Well, he needs to show some skill on 4th down. That's pretty obvious. And when you look at David Sills, you really don't think of him as someone who has skill on special teams. You think of a guy like Alex Bachman who could have that, CJ Board, Richie James. I think that's pretty much it in terms of special teams abilities and skill sets. He's, in my opinion, either a 5 wide receiver or bust. I'm talking in terms of like the back end of the wide receiver core. And it's tough for me to actually grasp that he could possibly make this roster because there's a lot of talented guys who've gotten opportunities and have made, good of their opportunities in the NFL, while David Sills has been a camp body and he hasn't necessarily made too much impact, whether it's his fault or not. He hasn't made too much impact in the NFL, but he needs to show some special teams abilities to try to get onto this roster because, once again, your locks are Kadarius Toney, Wan'Dale Robinson, Sterling Shepard if he doesn't start the year on PUP, and Galladay. I almost forgot one, Kenny Galladay. Darius Slayton isn't a lock, so we may have a video on him soon. And also avoid dropping passes with the 2s and 3s. He's not going to be with the 1s unless Galladay and Toney and Wan'Dale Robinson are completely injured. Unless those guys are hurt, he's going to be playing with the 2s and 3s and make most of your opportunities. Camp noise is one thing, but if you're not doing too well in the preseason, and I know one of the crucial passes that may have gotten him cut in the first game was Clayton Torson threw up a ball, and if he's a 50-50 receiver. He's not Kadarius Toney. He's not Wan'Dale Robinson. He's not Sterling Shepard. He's not that quick type. But he could have had it. It was a 50-50 ball. Now, was it perfectly placed? No, but he had to corral that. Like, it was here when he was going up with the DB, but then it came out of his hands. So you can't have that as a 50-50 receiver trying to make the roster. But, once again, he did have, I think, something like 64 receiving yards in that game. Then he scored a touchdown against the Browns, and pretty much that was it from there in terms of hearing from David Sills. How can he lose? Has a quiet camp and doesn't stand out from other wide receivers. If you don't see him, in camp, just dominate. I'm not to say dominated, but if he's not making any noise in camp or within the first 2 preseason games, I think it's pretty much over for him. I obviously understand the familiarity with Dable and Shane, some of the guys from Buffalo, but there are other wide receivers on this roster. And with that being said, there are other young, talented players out there that the New York Giants could sign as undrafted free agents. Now, once again, I'm probably pissing off the Sills army, but with that being said, Sills, he's a camp body. He's a camp body, and that's why I have him getting cut. I don't think he's going to be re-signed to the practice squad because, he's a camp body. And it's not really anything to write home about it at this point. With a new regime, if it was the Gettleman Judge regime, different story. He would have been re-signed to the practice squad. But there is a ton of talented wide receivers that are in front of him, or at least I think they're more talented, and they may have a skill set that fits his team more. Richie James on special teams. Robert Foster obviously knows Dable and Shane. I think he's got a better skill set. A skill set that fits his team more. Colin Johnson, I think, could fit this team a little bit better than a guy like David Sills. CJ Board possibly as well. I don't think Bachman's better than Sills. I don't think Doss is better than Sills, but obviously I'll review that and reveal my picks in a couple of videos from now. But I think he's going to get cut. I think this is the end of the line for David Sills, and it's going to be end of the line for a lot of the guys that were kept over on the practice squad from these past few years. And this year, it's going to be the final. It's going to be it for them. It's how I want to say it. If you haven't already, like, comment, and subscribe, turn on post notifications so you know when a live stream pops or drops. Appreciate y'all coming back. Peace out, guys. See you later. Stay cool and enjoy your weekend.